You're listening to 94.4 FM with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, on the Friday Sports Show. We have an action-packed show lined up for this evening. We're very fortunate on this show to bring you some of the world's best athletes, sports people. We get footballers, coaches from all sorts of disciplines, bringing you all the latest news around the area, around the world. And today we got a fascinating guest from we've had this guest before, and he's given us some really fascinating insights. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is football and strikers and how valuable they are in the game to have a natural finisher. And we've got someone who's developed a lot of strikers, and a very experienced manager is going to talk about that too. And you can chip in by sending us a message via Facebook, the Friday Sports Show, and let us know your thoughts about strikers. They make a huge difference to the game. But our first guest this evening is director of the Australasian Soccer Academy. He's a well-renowned coach, an up-and-coming coach in Australia. He's produced a number of players, and recently he's had some success at a tournament, the 2020 Maltese Cultural Cup with Parramatta. Tony Basha, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks, Jimmy. Always a pleasure, bud.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. And this show here, we aim to bring all the latest news from around the local area and around the world, giving the listeners an insight into what goes on around the world in sport. And there's no better person, obviously, than yourself to talk about football in Australia. And you've been involved in the 220 Maltese Cultural Cup. That was in Melbourne, was it, Tony?
Yes, it was in sunny Melbourne, mate. It was good to go over there and win the competition. We didn't expect it, to be fair. Yeah,
because I noticed that you took a young team, by all accounts. You took a really young team, and you've been known for blooding youngsters and giving them the chance to play at first team level. And was it a young team, Tony, you took over there, or?
Yeah, it was. It was a young team from the academy. We've just started the full-time program with the academy where they train 5 days a week. So we train 5 mornings. So we want to pick up the intensity, basically, because obviously a lot of the players in Australia train 3 nights a week, which is not good enough to be a pro. So now we've got this new program at the academy where they train 5 mornings, 6:30 a.m. to 8 o'clock. Kids have showers, go to school before then. So yeah, basically it's a team that come from the academy, and they were 17, 18, and we had a couple of 16-year-olds in the team. And obviously we had 1 or 2 senior players who were obviously 25 plus, which, you know, they've done a great job for us, and we beat some good teams along the way.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Tony. I mean, over here, not too far away from here, there's been, you know, a club that you're very familiar with and have played against as well with your academy, Man City. You've played against some of the younger teams, and throughout the year there's been, I wouldn't say debate, but the likes of Phil Foden, who's a youngster, who's sort of a phenomenal talent. Pep Guardiola sings his praises. He's starting to break in the team, and he's still young and has a long way to go in terms of his development. No doubt he'll sort of carry on getting better. But in terms of yourself, Tony, you've been a coach who's always given the youngsters a chance. And do you feel that, I mean, how do you take the pressure off the youngsters in terms of letting them play? And one thing I've noticed when you've been on tour, you tend to take the pressure off and give them the freedom to express themselves and play the game in terms of, you know, getting at players. And is it something that you do sort of naturally, or you sort of train them, or you have the confidence of the young players?
Look, to be honest, for the coaches that are coaching professional football, sometimes, obviously, you know, their job's on the line, so it's not always easy to blood the young players into the game, or into their games, you know that. Mm-hmm. You won't survive as a coach. But look, for me, I learn a lot, to be honest. I'm not just saying it, but I learn a lot of my stuff through NLP course I did. Yeah. It made me understand players' mindset. It made me understand what players want. And obviously, being a player myself, I know what I used to love and how I used to feel when the coach would speak to me in a certain way. So I've just, you know, learned to, you know, obviously make them feel good about themselves, because, as you know, football for me is 90% mental. It's a mental game. So if you feel like you feel good, and someone's telling you you're good, and you start to believe it, then you're going to play good, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if your head is not right, doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to fail, you know. So
Absolutely.
we try and make them feel good and make them, you know, feel like, you know, it's easy, it's just a game, and just, it's a lot of mental work, you know, rehearsal that I do with the players. So, you know, anyone's good enough. Well, age is a number, mate. So, you know yourself.
Absolutely. I think if
a kid's 15, he's going to play. It doesn't matter. You know?
Yeah, if you're good enough, you're old enough. Absolutely, and I think
that's exactly right.
I mean, that's a great tour from the Gard to Melbourne, albeit it's you know a couple of hours fly in that respect, but it's still for the youngsters. Obviously, it's a huge experience to sort of go out there in a different environment and against players who are slightly older, and also the intensity, the desire to win, and no one, you know, gives away matches. People fight to win no matter what level you're playing. Was it a big learning experience for the players to go out there, Tony? And obviously, you know, it's an important game, and obviously it's a game, a tournament that people take serious. Was it a big experience for them to learn?
Yeah, 100%. Like what you just said, you know, on the head. It's experience. A lot of the boys never played against first team players before. So obviously first time for them, and obviously they come away, you know, winning and obviously feeling good about themselves, and obviously getting them ready for the season ahead for their clubs. At the end of the day, what's all we can do. But in regards to Melbourne's a little bit different game to Sydney. Sydney's a bit more tactical. Where in Melbourne, I found it very rough, and there's some big boppers. You know, some of our young boys.
Yeah.
Up against some big boys, and they were getting kicked, mate. It actually reminded me of being in England watching. When I was out there watching, what's that club that you?
Non-league football. Yeah, Bacup football. I mean, it was got Brent coming on. Bacup later on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but no, it's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting point you make, and we're going to speak to Brent later on in the show. But it's a really interesting point you've made there. About the physicality. What I notice sometimes, Tony, is that sometimes the younger players who get released from the full-time game, they'll come down to, say, for example, the non-league, but they'll struggle. I think in their own mind they think sometimes that because they've sort of played professional level, it's going to be a walk in the park. But when they play against older players, it's like a shock to the system, you know, in regards to the old cliche, men against boys. Have you sort of noticed that some of the younger players that might have been released from a bigger team or a team that sort of traditional team, over here, their professional team, they fall in the non-league and then they struggle with what is a different game. How do you account for that, Tony? The recovery, so to speak, of the physicality. I mean, how do you sort of teach young players that this is what it's all about? There's no quarter.
City and tell you, as a coach, has been doing it for a long time. A player needs to be smart. You know, I think the players now they're not smart enough. Well, for me, I say a player doesn't get touched. Move the ball quick decision making. You know what you're doing before you get the ball. I think some of the players aren't good enough, you know, to do that. So they get themselves kicked. And you know yourself, if you're playing in that league, you've got to move the ball off 1-2 touch. If you start playing with it and trying to dribble, I think it's going to break you.
Absolutely.
You have to be you got to be intelligent. You know, move the ball quick.
Yeah, and absolutely.
You know, move off 2 touch.
You know, that's a really interesting point you made there, Tony. The reason being actually is sort of just to sort of reflect on something, and this is a prime example that we can both reflect on. I'm sure the listeners are going to sort of really find this fascinating. And you know, one of the lads who obviously played for you in Australia, who played for Bacup, he'd been released from Sheffield United, Kingsley Williams, and he for me, he's a tough customer. He's a tough, you know, he's tough. He adapted well in the league and shone in the league. But I think that he'd probably be the first to admit when he got released from Sheffield United that it was hard to make the transition initially because the league is really, really tough. And what did you make of Kingsley's experience in Australia, Tony? How did he make the transition out there?
Oh, mate, look, Kingsley Williams, for me, is a phenomenal player. I don't say that lightly. He's a fantastic player. He's tough. He's agile. He's a good footballer. He's a very good footballer. Look, I did watch him. That's why I spotted him at Bacup. Remember the time? And
that's right. Yeah,
told you. I said, "Who's this player? I like him."
Yeah.
Then you told me he was at Sheffield. He was at Sheffield United. So
yeah,
I was a good scout that day. But he came. Look, I said to him, I said, "Look, mate, you're a good player. Come to Australia." And he came and he played in the NPL one. And he was chased by every club in the competition. I did send him over to Central Coast Mariners A-League for a trial. I got him in there with the A-League. The coach liked him, but he said he wasn't fit enough at that time. He needed someone fitter.
Yeah.
But look, he's a phenomenal player, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of players in England who are facing the same. They get released from their clubs, and they've got nowhere to go. And some of them don't want to play at that level.
That's right. No, that's
as you said, it's brutal.
It is tough, and I find sometimes they find it hard to. There's the style of the game, and I mean the team that Kingsley played for, the Sheffield United team. I think they came. They made the final of the FA Cup Youth Cup against a strong United team, and gave them a good run for their money. So he sort of came from a strong team, but like you says, I mean, I've seen it before where even with Bacup, when I was involved in the past, we played like friendly games against professional opposition, the youth team. And we'd sort of, for example, we played Oldham one time, who sent a youth team over, stroke reserve team. We turned them over comfortably because they sort of don't realise that it's a physical game. And I think for me, if you don't match the opposition physically, then that's a big area and that leaves you open. But yourself, Tony, we sort of reflect on the A-League and how it's gone, and we spoke off air and we both had our thoughts on that. You sort of know a lot more than me in that respect, but you've recently had a player, the academy lad, I believe, Christian Volpato, who's gone across to Roma, who are a strong team, by the way, and they've produced some great players over the years. What a great place to play and learn your football. Tell us a bit about him and for the listeners' time listening in.
Look, Christian was playing for the Wanderers Academy under 15s, and he wasn't retained. I said it wasn't good enough.
Wow.
And I got a phone call from his mum one night. She goes, I heard about you, and I'd love to bring my son over. I said, no problem. So he came to the academy. We had a meeting in the office with him and his mum. And she said to me, she goes, "This is what's happened." I said it wasn't good enough, and we didn't know what to do with him. So I invited him for a training session, mate. And I looked at him and I thought, I pulled his mum aside after training. I said, "Can I ask you a question?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Who released your son? Was that guy smoking something?" Or
yeah.
I was actually shocked. This guy was a good player. Like, mate, this guy's sharp, left footer, brilliant dribbler. Sharp as a knife. He can score goals. So these guys. This is why we struggle in Australia. It's why we're so bad.
Yeah, no.
So I said, you know what? Come on, train him. And I trained him for 7 months. Prepared him, and I rang my friend at AS Rome. I said, "Mate, I've got to play for you. Italian passport, and have a look at him." And I sent him. And after 2 weeks, I said to me, "Tony, we love this guy. Mate, he's fantastic."
Wow.
And the rest is history.
That's amazing, Tony. That's a great experience for the lad. And
3-year deal.
That's amazing. And his parents must be over the moon. His family over.
Oh yeah. They were crying, mate, when they signed. He texted me. This was nice for when I heard this. When I read the message, he goes, "Hey Tony," he goes, "We did it. We did it."
Fantastic.
Thinking, he goes, "We did it." I said, "Mate, you did it."
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing is you've been a modest coach over the years, Tony. I think for me, you had the insight to see that ability and help nurture and train it, and that's the sort of key going forward. I mean, obviously Roma's a big club and they've got a good training infrastructure. We've seen some great young players come through the ranks there, and I think the big thing for him there is to play and train every day with players of really exceptional ability. He's got a big chance to sort of fulfil his potential, and obviously young, and he's got to keep going and working hard. The hard work starts now. I mean, sometimes do you ever get the players sometimes saying that they sort of weary? Sometimes they think that they've made it, and sort of you got to keep going, and even when you sign and you take a leaf out of some of the players' books who've been in the program for years and they keep training hard. I mean, look at Ronaldo, for example. I mean, you see the guy at his age now, and he's still scoring goals. And how important is it, Tony, do you think, from your perspective, that players keep working hard and don't rest on their laurels?
Look, 100%. He hasn't made it. I said to him, listen, mate, you haven't made it.
Yeah.
I said, you've signed a 3-year deal. I said, oh, you haven't made it. You signed a first-team deal.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And it's very, very important that player knuckles down and works hard. Even if he's made it into the professional league, if you want to stand out and be better, you've got to do more. It's very important that they keep their training up, keep their intensity up, look after their bodies, make sure they're doing rehab.
Yeah.
It's very, very important. It's and a lot of players, they think that they can just do the team training. It's enough. So that's not enough. You need to do more to get more out of yourself, like Ronaldo does. You mentioned Ronaldo.
Absolutely, yeah.
He's the first one at training and the last one to leave.
Absolutely. And when you went to visit Real Madrid, was he playing there, Tony? Ronaldo?
Yeah, he was. I actually watched him and spoke to him. Yeah,
Wow.
I chatted to him and I watched him train. And he told me that how he comes off the plane and he goes straight to the ice bath. Mate, the guy's an ultimate professional.
And also the thing is too, Tony, you see players like Ronaldo, and they, I mean, I've not met him. I've seen him train too when I went to visit United a few years ago. But I went every now and again. I go visit United training. I've got some friends and colleagues there that work there just to see what they're up to. I haven't done so for a while, but I have done in the past. But one thing that strikes me about him is he's sort of got this humbleness about him. He's sort of, I think that's a big thing for players, Tony, these days especially. I know it's a cliche, we talk about these days, but there is some truth, I think, in that with some players. And, it just strikes me as a humble player. It's got to be important. Any young player listening, how important is it, Tony? You've seen so many players develop and go on to be professionals, to stay humble and just grounded.
Look, 100%. Look, at the end of the day, it's, you are doing something you love, and you're obviously very lucky, but it's keep you there, and fans will like you, and they'll respect you, and they want you, and so you always must be humble and always give time to the fans. I've always been someone that teaches all my players that are playing professional, always give time to the fans and stay true to yourself. Don't think you're better than anyone else.
Yeah.
And all my players, thankfully, all good boys, and they're loved by the fans, and because they give time to the young kids after the game. They take photos with them. They, sometimes they go to their birthday parties at their house, and these guys are professional players who play for the national team.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
It's good. Yeah,
that's a good thing.
It's important.
And it inspires players too. I think it inspires young players. They see that and think that it's within reach to be the best you can be. But also it shows that it's important to be a decent person off the field too, and to sort of live and in a proper way type thing as well. Because obviously, I think that players are in the public eye, and I'm not saying they have a duty to be a role model, but it's good to see players sort of conducting themselves in the right way. And we see a lot of cliches and a lot of things in the press about what sort of certain sports people get up to these days. But it's always nice to see some of the good things they do, like visit hospitals and sign autographs for kids, and go out of their way too to putting on sessions and talking to players too. It's important that we promote that as well. But one thing it does raise for me, the signing of Christian Volpato to Roma, it does raise some question marks, Tony. You're much better placed to answer than me about the A-League, and I don't want to criticise any managers I don't know, any coaching staff I don't know, because I know it's not easy. I've been there myself. You've got to make big decisions about taking players on, but surely you'd like to think that a player that calibre, somewhere along the line, would have been identified somewhere. And what are some of the things the A-League, Tony? I mean, to me, it seems Australian football has gone backwards in the last 10 years, if we're brutally honest, and we've got to be honest about that. I mean, the team in 206 compared to the team now, you kind of think, well, from the national point of view, and even the old National Soccer League, you think the A League would have improved on that, but I don't think it really has in producing players. And is that a fair estimate, Tony? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely spot on. The NSL was a lot better. The NSL had better players. The NSL had smarter players. They had more skilled players. The only thing the A-League has better than what the NSL has is it's televised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's on Fox Sports. They televised a couple of games on free-to-air TV where NSL wasn't televised. But obviously, if you see the numbers and the Socceroos, you know, the strong team that went on to lose to Italy in the semi-final.
That's
those
right.
guys all NSL played. I mean, and they're all playing overseas. If you look at the ratio of players playing in the English Premier League. I think there's only two. Where before we had like 8, 9.
That's right.
You know, so it's definitely gone backwards, and unfortunately the players aren't as good because I think it comes down to social media. There was on their phones, but there's no camaraderie anymore. It's a strange one, and the guys running the game in Australia and the guys and the chief executive officers that are running clubs are, mate. But I don't know what they are, mate. They're not even football people.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Unfortunately, the game in Australia has gone backwards.
That's a great point. And I think that's the important point you make about being football people. I think the other thing too, from my understanding, is the finance aspect of playing the game too. The registrations, I believe, have gone astronomical too in terms of
mind-blowing.
Yeah.
$2,500 to play in the NPL. It's a
wow.
It's a fair income rip-off.
Wow.
And they do it to compensate. For the first team players. So what happens is, if there's a budget of $200,000 for the first team in the NPL, the money comes from the youth. So the youth boys play 2.5. So that's what pays the first team players, the juniors. And to be honest, they throw any coaches in to do the job. My grandma will go and get a license. We go and do a course. She'll be coaching one of the NPL teams. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, no, that's not good, mate. That's not good.
There's only a handful. There are some good coaches there. There's a handful of good coaches, but mate, some of them, I would let my neighbour's cat be coached by some of those coaches out there, mate. It's absolutely awful.
Yeah, no,
that's being nice.
An interesting point you make, and I mean, obviously you've worked really hard yourself, Tony, with your academy, and you've built an infrastructure there, and from what I can see, and people can see it listening, if they type in the Australasian Soccer Academy, they can see the facilities, the state-of-the-art stuff in terms of what you've got. And I know when I visited the academy too, every sort of year or so I've come over and caught up with you and sort of the academy, there's always something new you've introduced. And we're talking like years ago, you had stuff like GPS tracking and game break and statistic and that sort of stuff. And now I can see other stuff and that you've brought in too. But your facilities, Tony, state of the art in terms of your development, and that must have taken a lot of hard work. And now we're at the moment in terms of the full-time program, and what are great opportunities for players to sort of train full-time and have a good go. And in terms of your facilities that you worked hard to put together, and you worked really hard to do that. You've obviously, it's been hard to get support and that sort of stuff, but you've sort of managed to get up and run. And tell us about where you're up to in terms of your facilities, Tony, the academy.
Yeah, look. To be honest, the facility is really, really good. I thank Man City for that because when I spent some time over there with Gary Riley and Trevor Todd and the boys over at Manchester, they welcomed me into the club and they showed me around and they taught me a lot. And I went back with the ideas and I put the ideas to practice. And to give our players the best possible care that we can, because our facilities in Australia are poor, and we don't have the infrastructure, and unfortunately you've got to pay a lot of money to use the clubs, or if they ever let you use it. So we need to have something for our own players, and to have players there all the time in wet weather, and to have something they feel proud of, and we don't get help from the government, to be fair.
Yeah.
The government doesn't help, the councils don't help. It's just that we fund it. I have to fund that with my family.
Yeah.
To give these kids something they love, and they do. They love it when they come there. They don't want to go home.
Yeah, no,
it's being there and hanging out there.
It's a great point you made, and I think the other side of it too is creates that community. And if players aren't playing football and haven't got anything to do, or not doing up to much, obviously, they don't have meaning and purpose, then it's not a good thing for them. And I think that's a great thing, and there's always got a chance. And I think the good thing about the academy too, Tony, the players that have graduated and gone on to big things, they come back, and I see them sometimes on social media. They come back and they talk to the younger players. And how much of an impact does that have when you got the likes of, say, a Mitchell Duke who comes back and says, this is where I'm up to, this is what it was like to play abroad and back in the A-League. The younger players must be buzzing about that, Tony.
Yeah, they do. Like when the boys come back and they visit the kids get excited. And the kids want to be like them. And we get other people too. Like we also like to invite. Like there's a few guys that play for Sydney Kings basketball. They come out and then they hang out with the boys. And obviously they're professional players. They're still the same training to get to where
Absolutely.
Every other footballer has. So it's the same thing. We like to get people down there, and obviously, like I said, the former players come down there and they mingle with the parents. The kids get excited, and they feel like Phil was here and he made it. I can do it too.
Yeah.
So it gives them a sense of hope.
Breaks the barrier.
Basically.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely, and it builds that belief barrier. And I mentioned earlier in the show that I was going to be speaking to Brent, who as well, and he's going to tell us about the situation with strikers and in terms of the team he's playing. And I've been involved with the team this year. I've helped out when I can, and obviously it's not easy because I've got other commitments too. But as and when I have done this season, and the football's been great. They've been playing some really great football. The issue is really sort of getting a natural finisher. Now, it's hard to get someone who's got that ability to sort of hit the back of the net, and you can make 20 chances, and if you're not scoring, then the confidence goes, the other team scores. And I know you do, I'm pretty sure you do like striking training too, Tony, but what's your thoughts on strikers, Tony? I mean, how hard is it to get a finisher these days, and how important is it for a team to get someone who can hit the back of the net regularly?
Mate, I can finish if you want to strike.
No, that's right, precise. That were my thoughts. Yeah. Come back out of retirement. Yeah. You know, mate. If you don't score, it's a cliche. You can't win. At the end of the day, if you got strikers are worth a lot of money, and they're not easy to find, mate. There's not many good ones out there anymore. Yeah.
Mate, you need a good striker. Like I learned that last year too, when I had the coach there doing the first team at Parramatta, mate, strikers can't score. It's impossible. It's impossible to find someone nowadays that can score. Look, there's also depending on the team. Depends on the coach what the style is playing.
Yes.
You can get a striker that runs in behind. Do you want a quick nippy striker? Do you want a striker that gets your wingers in play? There's different type of striker that but getting a striker that can score, mate, I'll tell you what, it's very, very hard. Yeah, and that's why the premium. A lot of strikers don't do the training. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why they're a premium in terms of financially, and it's hard to get, and that's why they command top dollar, so to speak. It's not easy to get one, but when you do, and also confidence is a big issue too, strikers too, and we've seen the best strikers in the world. But you made a really good point there, Tony, and that sort of reminds me of sort of players that we see that sometimes people underestimate the value of, like, say, a Giroud who holds the ball up and brings other players in, and when we think striker, but many years ago, the likes of a Thierry Henry who was playing out in the wing in Italy, and then Wenger brought him to the UK, and he played a more central role, and he was just scoring goals for fun. And I think it's really important too, like he says, to make sure that they're clear. And is that what you do in the striker training, Tony? Like, you sort of, as well as work on finishing, you work on obviously the components of the game and dropping deep and holding the line and making sure that's the movement, or are they areas that you work on as well in your striker training? Yeah, look for me, like scoring goals is an art. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This requires training. You can't just think you're going to score goals without training it. And unfortunately, in today's game, and the coaches and the clubs, they don't do enough striker training, finishing practice at training.
Yeah.
They think that's going to come natural. Then they come to the games on the weekend. They say, "Oh, why'd you miss so many goals? Because maybe you didn't do it. You don't do practice.
Yeah.
You've got to train." I think strikers should be doing striker training on the weekend, like during the week.
Absolutely.
For me, what's a striker's job?
Absolutely, score goals. Yeah, no, absolutely.
So why isn't he doing that at training? Why isn't he doing that for 2 hours a week?
Absolutely.
Just scoring goals.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point,
You know what
Tony.
I'm saying?
No, absolutely.
Very important.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I've worked in the professional game, I've made a big point of that, to give the players some time, even if it's like half an hour every training session, just making sure, obviously, they don't pick up any niggles to overuse muscle injuries and that sort of stuff. But I've definitely made a point of that. In the semi-pro league, it's a bit harder because obviously you're relying on them too to do their bit, and sometimes the players work too, and they come home and they go home and they do whatever. But like he says, I mean, you know, you really, to push on to the next level, you've got to sort of train at that sort of tempo, match tempo as well too, and sort of be able to hit that back of the net. And just getting the feeling of hitting the back of the net too is a good thing too. When sometimes people forget what it's like when you hit that sort of exhilaration of the ball hitting the back of the net as well too. But you know, that's a big thing for sure. But it's really interesting, Tony. I've sort of, you know, been kind of to come on board the show and share your insights as usual. It's always great to speak and great to have you on board the show. Absolutely. On sort of a final note, you're very familiar with this area. You've been here on a number of occasions. You mentioned you sort of visited the likes of City on a few occasions. And do you have any sort of tours lined up for the foreseeable future to the UK and Europe yourself, or how's things going with that?
Yeah, it's end of September, early October. We're gonna do a tour of Spain and England. I want to come back to England again.
Tremendous, yeah.
Catch up with yourself and a few
Absolutely.
of the guys. So we're looking forward to it, to get back there. And look, we love England. Obviously, football is good.
Yeah.
And, for me, I love England. I'd love to live there, but the weather absolutely kills me, mate.
Yeah.
The rain's killing me, mate.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful place. Good.
Yeah.
Like, mate, it's a home football. Like, I really like going there because of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you know, it's some good people there, and you know, I'm looking forward to coming over there, mate, and watching some football and playing some football against some good teams.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tony, and looking forward to you popping over and have to drop in the studio as well and bring a few of the lads in, and we'll obviously have a chat then. But between now and then, we'll definitely be back on the show and sort of track the progress of the academy, and who knows, some of the lads who come over may even find themselves in one or two teams over here as well, all things being well. But for the experience itself, it would be great for them to experience football, like he says, where it is a huge sport, that's for sure. But thanks again for being on the show, Tony. As always, it's been a pleasure talking to you, mate, and we wish the academy all the best and continued success in what you do.
No, mate, thanks for having me, buddy, and looking forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks, Tony. So you're listening to 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show, with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi. And we have another special guest on the show, someone I worked closely with for many, many years, who's been on the show before, who's been in football management for many, many years, and has celebrated a number of success. And we've been talking about strikers and the importance of them on the show, and how difficult it is to get natural finishes, and how strikers demand a premium in the transfer market. As a team, you can be playing badly in some games. You've got a striker, he or she will get you out of a game, and there's probably not many better people placed to talk about the importance of strikers than our next guest, who's been around the game for a long time, has seen many outstanding strikers at the club that he's at, Bacup, but also this year I've seen the team play, and even last season, some breathtaking football. It's just sometimes that sort of end result. Brent Peters, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board, Bacup Borough football manager.
My pleasure, Jimmy.
We've been talking about strikers on the show, Brent, and we sort of highlight as being a big area, and I think sometimes it can be understated that how important strikers are to a team. What's your take on it, Brent? Is it fair to say that Bacup this season have played some fantastic football, just hitting the back of the net? And what's your take on strikers and how important they are to a club?
Well, it goes without saying. I mean, obviously there's different types of strikers. There's you've got kind of strikers that'll chip in with the odd goal, but the more creative strikers, if you follow my meaning, and then you've got the clinical strikers that's their job. They'll put the ball in the net. They're like the fox in the box, half a chance, bang, it's in the net. The clinical. Yeah. And obviously those sorts of strikers are hard to come by. And when you do come by them, they're sought after by everybody. And if they're sought after by everybody, they come at a premium, because what happens? It happens at every level. Whether you're at the top, whether you're at the bottom, what happens is that there's always clubs out there that will offer them, a king's ransom to go and play for them, and that's what kind of happens. It's very, very difficult. I mean, if you look at the situation that I found myself in here at Bacup Borough, the start of the season, close season, you build your squad like any other manager in the football world will do. You build your squad, you put your pieces into place, and then when you're looking at like the striking situation, and you target a lad that's clinical, that can score your goals, and that's what's going to happen. Like I've done, I offered him a contract on the table and basically said, there's a contract there. I want you to sign that contract, because, like I said to him, what happens is we're not working on 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. We're working on a 9-month football season. So I want to make sure that when you start banging those goals in, that you're my player, and no club can put a 7-day notice in on you, and then you can be here today, gone tomorrow, because that's no good. So what basically happened in our situation? The player come along. He's a player that I've known for many years. I've looked after him. He's been at this club before. In fact, he's been a contract player at this club before. He's 30 year old. He's 30 year old now, and he's like, you could say he's peaking. He's at his prime. And basically, that's what I said to him. And he wanted it, despite lots of offers. He wanted Bacup Borough. He wanted to be at Bacup Borough Football Club. But what he didn't want to do, he didn't want to sign a contract, which made it very difficult. That meant that it's a bit like, it meant the arrangement that we had was quite loose, which meant that kind of, again, a 7-day notice, he could be here today, gone tomorrow. Yeah. So what happened there, he said, I don't really want to sign a contract, but I'll give you my word, which is like a gentleman's agreement, that he would see the season out. No matter what happens, I will see the season out at Bacup Borough. You've got my word on that. Unless, and there was one criteria, unless something else happened, and if something else were to happen, he didn't want to be at the club while it was about a player, and he didn't want to be at the club when this particular player was at the club. So I shook hands and I agreed, and I said that particular player won't be at the club and won't be returning to the club. Lo and behold, we start off the season, we had like a house on fire. We were always scoring every game. We were creating lots and lots and lots of goals. And then the next thing that happens, we're creating chances, scoring lots of goals, scoring 3s and 4s again. All of a sudden, and every single week, I was inundated with 7-day notices, and it was getting weary, from all varying clubs, all wanting to talk to this striker. Yeah. Next thing that happened, he was resisting the opportunity of speaking to him, but all of a sudden one club put 7 days in on him, and he felt that he knew the coach there, and he felt that he earned it to himself to just speak to him to see what they had to say. And the rest is history. They obviously offered him a king's ransom, something we couldn't compete with. and 7-day notice he was gone, and we've never been able to replace him during the season, and that's left a void, and that can happen. This is what I'm not knocking the lad in any which way, shape or form, but my point I'm trying to make is managers set the stall out for a 9-month football season, not 3 months, not 2, and I feel grieved now for whatever expenses I paid him for the 3 months that he was here, 2.5 months that he was here. It's just I might as well give it that to charity, because it hasn't fulfilled what I needed it to fulfil, and that was, for whatever good work he did in that period of time when he's here, that it's all been
the project,
because at the end of the day, he hasn't seen it through. So it's left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But these are the things that happens with people that won't sign a contract. Do you turn around and say to them, "Well, you're not coming now if you don't sign it"? But then you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Absolutely, yeah, that's true.
So you've really got to just say, okay, but trust them on the word. But obviously, the lure of all these clubs coming in for him on a 7-day notice was too much, and at the end of the day, that's exactly what happened. So it's very, very difficult. It really is.
It's an interesting point, Brent, you make there, and I think that we see it in the professional game. How difficult it is to get strikers and how valued they are. I mean, sometimes there's question marks raised about transfer fees, and strikers generally command the biggest fee, and it's difficult to compete. And we see it in the professional game where a player gets produced and goes through the ranks, but then goes on and goes on for huge amounts of money. I think for the fans listening and for people listening, and with someone of your experience, sort of maybe highlighting how important they are to a team to have that fox in the box. And we saw, for example, Leicester when they won the Premier League, they had the likes of Vardy, who had pace, and he could always get you a goal even if things weren't going well. But how important is it, Brent, to have that fox in the box to sort of, like you mentioned earlier, different types of strikers, but the actual clinical finisher. We remember the Robbie Fowler, obviously, like carrying finish, brain. Yourself, even these players are training, was it they sort of naturally got that instinct, or was a bit of both?
Finishes, it just comes natural to them. But I do think there's a bit of both, and like the player I was talking about in question that I was talking about when he several years ago, when he first came to me at Bacup Borough, he was a left wing back, blinding pace, could go past people, great delivery, good defender when he had to get back in and defend, good defender. And how that came about, what happened were he decided that he wanted a break one season away from playing in the demands of the football that, in the leagues that like we're in at Bacup, and he went and played amateur football up in Huddersfield. But the manager at that team, put him up front. And he really enjoyed it and scored lots of goals. So one of the agreements were when he came back here originally, when he did come back to me, was, look, I don't want to go back to left wing back. I really enjoyed my time, 12 months, playing amateur football up front. I scored lots of goals, and I'll guarantee I'll score you lots of goals. Now, this is a striker that wasn't really a striker, if you follow my logic. But the season he came back to me, I think he scored 42 goals. He ended up getting the league's, the North West Counties League Player of the Year. On the back of all the goals that he'd scored, which was incredible. So, and he wasn't really down as a natural striker. And since then, he's continued to score goals. He scored goals. He came back to me for the short time he was here, and he was scoring goals for me. He's gone on to his new club, and I see him in every game that he participates in. He always comes in and he's scoring goals. So, he's obviously got that in his locker. But he wasn't an out-and-out prolific striker when he started off. So it's a bit of both, really. But it is massive. I mean, you're never going to win games of football. Look, let's cut away from the chase here. Every game of football starts a draw, doesn't it?
Absolutely,
So you're never going to win a game of football unless you've got that clinical, you've got that finisher. If you've got that finisher, you've your chance of winning games of football. Even if it starts at 0-0 and you've got a striker that can just chip in with the odd goal, if you have got frailties at the back and you concede 2 goals and you're chasing a game, the chances are the striker that can chip in with an odd goal chips in with an odd goal, but it's not enough to get you 3 goals to win the game. But you need that clinical striker to be there, because he's likely to get you 2 goals, which with the other player's contribution of 1 goal, that gets you 3 goals, and you win from a game where you were 2-0 down, you suddenly win it 3-2.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Brent. And the thing is too, I suppose, for the listeners as well, one thing to think about is when you dominate a team and you've got possession, you're creating chances, and the other team goes up the other end of the field and gets a goal. It must be deflating too, Brent, to be on top and dominate possession and play good stuff. And do you think that's the case for players too, Brent, when they're sort of on top of a game and the other team sort of nicks a goal out of nowhere? Then it's like it's not going to be our day type thing, or is that a factor as well?
Well, it is, but it's like on Saturday with us.
Yeah.
We absolutely dominated the first half. We score after 3 minutes, and we're dominating, but we get more chances and more chances. That game should have been killed on Saturday at half time. But what's happened is, we've had the player that scored for us after 3 minutes has gone in on a 1v1 situation, and when he's got thinking time, when he's got a bit of thinking time, and what do I do here, and what he favours the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper has beat him on a 1v1 situation. And the same scenario happened a couple of weeks back up at Alker. It was identical the situation, and when he's 1v1. Now, the difference is, the player that's gone that I'm talking about, that's gone, he would have finished that. There was no 2 ways about it. In that 1v1 situation, would have finished it. The player that I'm talking about that scored after 3 minutes on Saturday, he's been in 2 of those situations now and faltered in them situations. But then in other instances, when he doesn't have time to think about it and he just strikes it nicely across the keeper or whatever, he can finish.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's a great point. I think that's a different. There's sort of turning points in the game, and like you said, Ben, I think that at 2-0 down, there's no way back for the opposition, and from there they always got a chance. And also there's the smash and grab as well, where sometimes you're up against a team and they get that one chance and then sort of defend resolute as well. What's your take on that, Brent? Where you get that one chance that goes your way, but you got like he says, you start the game in 0-0, you get a goal at a point in the game when it's hard to come back, maybe late in the second half, but you can be resolute as well. And does it give you confidence, Brent, as a manager, when you know there's a striker that is a natural finisher, a fox in the box type thing, even if you're not playing well as well? Or what are your thoughts on? Yeah.
Well, it does. I've seen me being in the technical area, and I spoke to my coach at times, and even though there's a striker on the pitch and he's not really doing it, you'll get some managers that'll say, oh, we've got a striker on the bench here, we'll do a straight swap 1-for-1. I disagree with that. I'll try and get all the strikers, as many strikers as I can on the pitch as I can, because if one's, the law of averages say, if one's missing, one of the others will finish, will score. So the more strikers you have on the pitch, the more chances you have of scoring goals. Yeah. If you just do what I call a safe substitution, which is 1-for-1, well, who's to say that the player you've just took off, a chance drops in the box and he finishes it, but you've took him off. And who's to say that the lad that's on, he could be having a bad day when he comes on. So, to be honest, the more strikers, if I've got 2 strikers on the pitch and we're not firing, rather than take one off and we're chasing a game, I'd rather take somewhere in another department off and get more strikers on in order to, because we can't, we don't know what player's going to come. It's like you can even look at the top level. Mm-hmm. Jamie Vardy you know, if he gets chances, he'll score.
Absolutely.
But he could turn up on a particular Saturday, manager will hang his hat on him, but then he doesn't. He's gone into them positions, and how many times have you heard it where you say, you know what? How many times is he in them positions? How many times did he put that ball in that net?
Absolutely.
But on this occasion, he hasn't.
Yeah.
And that's why. So if you're hanging your hat on Jamie Vardy and you take him off to just do a straight swap with somebody else, then, you know, you're restricted. You're just making it the same numbers otherwise. Whereas if you can do a substitution where Jamie Vardy still stays on and you bring another striker on with him or another striker on with him, then, you know, they could complement each other, and before you know where you are, you know, they get that bit of luck and bang, they're scoring.
Yeah, and absolutely, Brent. That's a great point, and I'm sure like a lot of the listeners will be reflecting on the times they've watched their team, or whether they've watched a City or a United, which are on the doorstep to Salford or Salford themselves. They'll know that, you know, good strikers are premium, the ones who can finish, and that's not undermining players who play a different striking role. We see the false nine, and we see players who hold the ball up and play in different roles as a striker. But I think, like he says, and reflecting on, you know, goals are what win your football matches, and having that. And United at the moment, Brent, your thoughts on, I mean, obviously Lingard, Rashford, and one thing that United has never been short of in the past is great strikers. We can think all the way back to for many years ago. There's always been an abundance of strikers. And what's your take on United's situation at the moment up front, Brent? I mean, it's been a bit sporadic, if we're honest, this season. I think even the most hardcore United fan.
I'm not going to beat about the bush. It's weary.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not being disrespectful, and this is nothing against Ole. Ole can only play with what he's got and what's in his pool. But let's be honest. I mean, wow, I've said this before.
Yeah.
You've got Martial up there wearing number 9. I mean, all those great strikers that's been at Manchester United. It's not. Listen, we know that he's got technical ability. We know that if he gets in a situation, he can finish. But blimey, what does he do? He struts around the pitch. There's no work rate for him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't. It's like our fighter. When he's closing down, it's like, well, I've closed down, but he doesn't. There's nothing else comes from him from that closing down. It's not like he goes and tries to put a foot in and be a bit of an aggressor. He doesn't. It's like you're carrying men. He doesn't have. He frustrates the life out of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Technically, he's very good. Technically, very, very good. But well, let's be honest. You need more than that. Like when you're playing for Manchester United, you've got to be, you've got to be full on. You've got to be able to run the channels. You've got to be playing. You've got to be able to hold the ball up. You've got to finish. Yeah. And at the end of the day, and one thing that is a stonewall certainty to what you've got to do, you've got to put the work rate in. And I'm sorry, but I don't think he does. Yeah. And that infuriates me. But who's he got to replace him? I mean, it was a blow in the last game when he lost. When he lost the young striker, it was a blow because you knew that. Well, what we're going to do? We're going to be struggling here. Jesse, for some reason or another, hasn't been the Jesse Lingard that were probably from a few years ago. I mean, you can't never fault Jesse's work rate. I would never handle that. I think Jesse does work hard and he does put honest performances in. But he's not producing that little killer instinct.
That's right. Yeah.
When he's in the final third.
No, so I mean, like the likes of a Dwight York, you always felt confident he'd get you a goal from somewhere, and I think that's one of the issues. But I think a club like United, Brent, it'd be fair to say the size of the club, we're talking about one of the biggest, if not the biggest clubs in the world, and hopefully, but you'd like to think that, like he says, it's as difficult as a manager, but there's got to be someone out there that they can bring to the club who is the finished article. In the past, obviously United have brought players through the ranks, but at this moment, but it's a tough one. I mean, they're a premium striker.
Well, I mean, look, this is what the transfer window does to you. It's in a daft way. It's a bit like what I've seen, but in a different scenario. At the start of the season, I've brought in a clinical striker. I wanted him on contract, doesn't sign a contract. Partway through, he goes, so I can't get a replacement. And games come thicker, faster before I can get a replacement. If you revert that to a scenario at Manchester United, you've got the strikers in, anything can happen to them. You could have them where they've had a bad injury. You could have them where they're losing form. They lose faith in the manager. There could be all sorts of scenarios. And before you know where you are, you know, you can't bring anybody else in because you're in a transfer window.
Yeah.
You're in a transfer window, so you've got to limp along until the transfer window comes.
And then
when the transfer window comes, you're not forced to get the player you want over the line because agents are involved. And because agents are involved, it's not half the time, it's not the player, it's the agent. Because he's using Man United as a bit of a yardstick with another club and saying, listen, don't hang on there, don't sign there, you can go there yet.
Yeah, and absolutely, Brent. Ideal scenario, you know, you get a striker like an Aguero who sort of stands the test of time. He's been a phenomenal striker for City, you know, the blue side. But it's not easy to have that. But like you said, strikers do lose form and get injured, and sometimes you've got what you've got going forward. And is there any striker that you can think of, Brent, that you'd maybe like to see at United, or do you think that they've got the players at the moment that they can develop, or how do you sort of see it going yourself? I mean, it's going to be a big transfer window, I think, in the summertime. That's for sure. You know, is there anyone you can think of that you'd like to see?
Listen. United, they're a massive club, and they'll obviously have the recruitment policy and players that they're targeting and who's out there. The only thing I would have said when it was in the transfer, when it come up to the last transfer window, which we all know it's a bad transfer, and there's all this speculation about Grealish and and the kid from Leicester City. Yeah. You know, it might be speculation, but let's be honest, Grealish were never going to leave Aston Villa in that window. You know, it's never going to happen. So it's pointless even thinking about that. But a cheeky one. What I would have done, especially after the Burnley game, and I see this kid a lot, who's all obviously played in the Premier League. A cheeky one, knowing that Man United were in a bit of the mess that they're in, and they've got nobody. They need to get to the next transfer window, and they've got nobody that works hard. I'd have gone to Sean. I'd have gone after the Burnley game, and I spoke to Sean Dyche and said, "Come on, Sean, I'll take Jay Rodriguez. I'll just can you not loan him to us? Just loan him to us till the end of the season. Because one thing you'll get out of Jay Rodriguez, what you're not getting now at Man United, is absolute work rate. Yeah,
it's a good shout actually. Yeah, and I think that work rate.
And he's played in the Premier League, and he can finish.
Yeah, no, that's a great shout, Brent. Absolutely, I think so. Sometimes it's sort of one thing that you've done yourself as a manager is sort of definitely build players' careers, and like you says, you've sort of had the sort of ability to give players an opportunity to shine, you know, from making transitions from left back to strike, and it takes a special eye to see that. But we're sort of running out of time, Brent. Thanks for coming on board the show. It's been fascinating insight. I'm sure the listeners are really fascinated by your thoughts. But thanks again, Brent, for being on the show. Wish you all the best for the rest of the season. You're listening to 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show, with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi.